Bosche's response to that, Brian?
I would say that your mentioning of his low approval rating has less to do with the American people's perspective on him as a politician and more to do with the perspective that the media has on President Trump. They've consistently oversampled Democrats in multiple national polls, and they constantly skew the questions in ways that don't give the president the credit that he deserves or even provide context to allow the viewer and those polled to make a good decision about how they feel about the president. This president, by all economic indicators, is producing an incredible economic, business-friendly engine for millennials, for Xers, for boomers. It's creating an environment where they can be successful, and for the first time in a decade, that they can begin to live their American dream, that they can actually invest in their future instead of just make ends meet.
Lesley, is it the media's fault again?
I guess, I mean, you can find any poll and pick it apart and find problems with it. But no, I would argue that it's not the media's fault for the approval ratings. I don't think the leading questions are generally, do you approve or disapprove of the president's performance? I mean, I haven't seen that poll and I haven't seen the questions. And I do agree that there can be polls that are misleading. We don't run them, we don't use them, we don't count them. We generally do trust pollsters like CBS News and the Washington Post polls. So,
I think most Americans don't agree with Donald Trump's policies. And most Americans are also having a hard time of it economically, even as the economy is booming and is out of control. 1 out of every 2 Americans is either in poverty or near poverty. Donald Trump giving a big tax break for the biggest corporations, the biggest banks, and the already very, very rich sectors of society doesn't bring relief to the masses of people who he needs to have vote for him. So when he says, I want to be bipartisan right now, he knows he can't really win again, and the Republicans can't win again unless they do something about this remarkable isolation that the Trump administration has plunged the Republican Party into.
Yeah, there's something of a reality check there, isn't there, Nathan? I mean, how much of all that money that's going to the stock market, where we see this record-breaking indices, how much of that is actually spread around?
Well, it's a good point. If you read Michael Wolff's book, Fire and Fury, and other sources as well about the president, he's obsessed with the numbers of the stock market. In fact, if you want to sell a policy to him economically, you have to reference it, apparently, to the stock market. Now, it's well known that a lot of people do have 401ks, but actually 80% of Americans do not own any stock whatsoever. They are not part of the booming Dow or the S&P 500. Their wealth comes from that one place, and that's their wages. And while we're seeing some wage growth, at the low end, we are not seeing wage growth, and wages are still stagnant. Okay,
another big issue on foreign policy, on foreign trade. The president addressed trade issues. Let's listen to what he said.
Both history and the reality prove that cooperation is the only right choice for China and the United States, and only win-win cooperation can bring us to a bright future. We hope the United States will cast aside its outdated Cold War mentality and zero-sum game mindset and view the Sino-U.S. relationship in the right way.
Well, the president went on the offensive, criticizing China again, accusing China of not playing on a level playing field, of not playing fair, and that is how the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs responded. What did you make of that?
Well, they're responding to the rival paragraph, but also the trade practices are kind of similar. It's a zero-sum game for Donald Trump when it comes to trade or international diplomacy. Someone wins, someone loses. It's quite interesting in this sort of multilateral, globalized world to have that opinion because it doesn't necessarily work. And it's going to be very interesting to see, for example, over NAFTA, over Chorus, the deal with South Korea, what happens. Because these are essentially deals with allies and neighbors. And if he can't get those right, some sort of renegotiation, then it doesn't bode well for the trade policies going forward. And then, of course, we have these big decisions coming forward on steel, aluminum, which could affect China, could affect Germany as well. And that is where the beginning, I don't want to talk about a trade war yet, but that's where you start, because we've already had washing machines, we've already had solar panels, we'll probably get something on intellectual property. And, you know, in this globalized world, we know how much Chinese investment is coming into this country. We know how much technology transfer happens, whether it be from the US to China or China to Germany or wherever. It is part of the globalized world we're living in. Do people need to sit down and talk about this? Yes, but threatening behavior will probably lead to retaliation from China and elsewhere.
Go ahead.
I was going to say there's also more immediate concerns or more at-home concerns for him on trade is he's getting pushed by a lot of farm state Republicans, for example, on NAFTA to not rip it up and to make sure they're taken care of. So
Absolutely.
I think
on the borders with Canada, on the borders with Mexico, they're dependent.
Yeah, and giant farmers in Kansas and elsewhere.
It's campaign rhetoric on the part of Trump. I mean, again, go back to his inaugural address. America, the carnage, the defeated former giant. And so the rest of the world has treated America unfairly, and now we must lash back at the rest of the world. When the fact of the matter is the American government and the American economy and all of the American corporations and banks have been the biggest beneficiaries of the global economic order. And who constructed this global economic order? Of course, it was the United States after World War II. It didn't treat even its defeated enemies in World War II, Germany and Japan, as irreconcilable foes. It brought them back, it rehabilitated, it gave them a sector of the world global market so they could resuscitate economically, and in exchange they were its allies and partners. Donald Trump is saying, oh, the old world order has humbled us, it's defeated us. What will be the end game of that? America will change its position in the globe politically, economically, and ultimately, if it relies only on military strength, only on hard power, that's a losing proposition.
Okay, there was one other big issue that was addressed in the State of the Union address, and that was immigration. And I'm going to get Brian Bosche's opinion of what the president had to say about immigration. The president outlined his 4-point plan. There are some, of course, in his Republican Party that are buying that plan, but the Democrats aren't, Brian.
I think it's fascinating about the Democrats not buying the plan that the president proposed last night in his State of the Union is that the president offered a pathway to citizenship for 1.8 million people who do not have a legal right to be here. I find that incredibly gracious, and I find that an olive branch across the aisle, and I think it's fascinating that the Democrats don't return the favor in terms of border enforcement and seeking a pathway to citizenship for the dreamers that they love so much. When you look at people like Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer or Dianne Feinstein, these are the same folks that in the 90s supported the very same merit-based approach that the president is proposing. They supported that back in the 90s. The only thing that's changed is they see the opportunity and they think that the dreamers will become Democratic voters in California and other states across the nation. They know what this is all about. This has nothing to do with principles on the part of Democrats. It has everything to do with getting new Democratic voters.
So I just want to say, the immigration debate, basically, let's rewind 2 weeks, because it nearly shut the government down, right?
Yeah.
We did shut the government down for 3 days. 3 days. It was over a weekend, hardly counted. But there was a deal. The Democrats were basically going to allow the wall to be built and fund it, even though Mexico was meant to pay for it, in return for some sort of pathway to citizenship for the dreamers. But then Trump pulled it back because his base and his advisor in the White House said no. They came out with another proposal which added the end of so-called chain migration, which is essentially a racist term, but also the visa lottery, and then added more stuff. And so they can't do that deal. So to say that this was an olive branch is, frankly, politically wrong.
And Brian disingenuously says that the Dreamers had no path to legalization, when in fact they were legalized. They were legalized under the DACA program, and the only reason their condition, their status has been brought into sort of uncertainty is because Donald Trump, using an executive order, repealed their legalization. So then for him to come back, for Brian to come back and say, but look at how gracious Donald Trump is to give them a path towards legalization when he was the one who just rescinded it, I mean, that's just double talk.
Very quickly, Brian.
Donald Trump signed the executive order ending DACA to set up the negotiation table to get Democrats talking about an actual solution to immigration, which this country hasn't had since essentially 1986. Our borders have been porous ever since the immigration bill under President Reagan, and we've done nothing to solve it. It was clearly to set the negotiation table to get Democrats talking about a real enforcement solution.
Okay, Lesley, very quickly, 10 seconds. Is this going to be resolved soon?
No. No, absolutely not. Not even Republicans were pretty angry with the citizenship idea.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Exactly. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.